Hello everyone, welcome back to MalStorm Gaming. My name is Malachi Gardner, and today I'm going to be going through my top 5 favorite multiplayer games as of 2020. These games are all picked based off of how much I enjoy them as a multiplayer experience. So the games on my previous list, which was the top 10 solo games as of 2020, those were all judged based off of how much I like playing them solo, with just me. These games I've picked based off of how much I enjoy playing them with at least one other person. So you will see a very different list from my top 10 solo games because of that. So let's get started. Alright, so my number 5 game to play multiplayer is going to be Citadels, published by Fantasy Flight Games. In Citadels, you are going to be building a kingdom, and to build this kingdom, you're going to be drafting roles each round to give you special abilities and special actions to be able to take, which will allow you to gain gold, which then you can use to build buildings, and whoever builds the best buildings gets the most points, and then wins. It's great fun, and I enjoy that you can play up to 6 players, which in a family of 6 is very nice. So that's my number 5, Citadels. Alright, my number 4 multiplayer game of 2020 is going to be Scythe, published by Stonemaier Games. Now, this game, when you look at all the miniatures and all of the mechs and all the cool characters, you think it's going to be like a dice-chucking Ameritrash game. But it's anything but that. It is more like a Euro-style economic game where you are getting resources and then using those resources to upgrade your different actions that you're able to take so that you can get more resources and more points, and then ultimately you're trying to get points. Now there is some fighting, but it is discouraged, which is kind of not what you're expecting when you see all of the cool mech miniatures, but in the end it is not a fighting game. But I do greatly enjoy it, and it is my number 4, Scythe, published by Stonemaier Games. Alright, so now my number 3 multiplayer game of 2020 is going to be Welcome to the Dungeon. Now this also includes the sequel and expansion, Welcome Back to the Dungeon, but with whichever one you choose, it's kind of going to be the same thing. So in Welcome to the Dungeon, you are all standing in front of a dungeon door. You're kind of boasting, you're saying like, alright, I can fight a skeleton. And the next guy says, alright, I can fight a skeleton without my sword. And then the next guy says, okay, I can fight a skeleton and a dragon without my sword. And it just kind of keeps on going up and up. Now, the game itself mechanically turns out to be a mixture of blackjack and chicken, which is a hilarious combination. Now, you're all taking turns either adding monsters to the dungeon, which are represented by cards, or by removing items from the list of items you're able to use as you go through the dungeon. So you might remove the torch or the sword. And one of you is going to end up having to go through the dungeon and fight all the monsters in the dungeon deck with whatever gear tiles you have remaining. So you might have to go through the dungeon and fight a ton of monsters without your sword and your armor. And it is just really fun. You know some of the cards in the deck, I know some of the cards in the deck, and we're just trying to use our imperfect information to decide whether or not we should just stay here and add more cards to the deck or run away. And that is my number 3, Welcome to the Dungeon. Alright, so now we're down to my number 2, which is going to be 5 Tribes, published by Days of Wonder. 5 Tribes uses this Mancala type mechanic where you're going to choose a space and then take all the meeples from that space. And then you'll put 1 meeple onto an adjacent space, and then you're going to put 1 meeple onto an adjacent space from that space, and so on and so forth, until you have placed your last meeple. Then, on the space where you've placed your last meeple, you're going to take all of the meeples of that color, and you're going to gain resources and points and various things based off of the color of the meeple. Now, it's really fun because you get into this analysis paralysis type state where you know there's this one space with 3 green meeples, and you really want to pick up those 3 green meeples. But how do you do that? Because you need to have the last meeple that you place there be green. So you're trying to find a space on the board where it has a green meeple, but it also has enough meeples that you can actually get from that space to the space you want to get to. And it is just really fun, and I really enjoy it. So that is my number 2, 5 Tribes by Days of Wonder. And finally, my number 1 multiplayer game of 2020 is going to be Battlecon, published by Level 99 Games. Now, Battlecon, the best way to describe it is saying that it's Street Fighter the board game. You have your fighter, your opponent has a fighter, and you are going at each other, trying to take the other one out, and it is very reminiscent of those fighting games like Street Fighter or Injustice or Mortal Kombat, where you each have your own moves and you're trying to outthink your opponent. Now, there are several Street Fighter type board games out there, but one thing that I really like about Battlecon is that each character has a unique ability. Now, this is a mechanic that is unique to that character. Now, you have one character who has these 3 tokens that will prevent you from being stunned. You can just spend one of these tokens whenever you would be stunned to prevent yourself from being stunned. You also have another character who has 4 elemental tokens that he can spend to infuse his attacks with elemental powers like fire or earth. And then you might have another character who is able to guess what speed you think your opponent is going to go at, and then if you guess correctly, you get a ton of speed to your attack and your opponent can't dodge your attack, and then you hopefully will do a ton of damage to them. So there's so many different characters in the game that each have their own unique rule and makes them special, in addition to their own unique moves that they can execute in order to attack your opponent. So it is all just so cool how different the fighters are. It's a really fun game. There's a lot of bluffing involved and trying to outsmart your opponent and play mind games together, and it is just really fun. So that is why it's my number 1 multiplayer game of 2020, Battlecon, published by Level 99 Games. I hope you all enjoyed this list, and I hope you will consider subscribing to see more content like this, and I hope you all have a great day. Happy gaming!